Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 6th episode of the Exploring Antinatalism Podcast, a podcast all about the subject of antinatalism created by antinatalists. My name is Amanda Oldfan-Sukanik, also known as Forever Wolf Films on YouTube, and today, Mark J. Maharaj, Carlos Cardoza, and I will be speaking with the founder of VHEMT, the Voluntary Human Extinction Movement, Les Unite. So thank you, Les, so much for being here with us today. How are you?
I'm doing well, staying alive.
All right, awesome. All right, so the first sort of set of stuff I'd like to ask you is just like some basic, VHEMT history. Obviously, VHEMT's been around a long time, much longer than a lot of, the forms that modern antinatalism is taking. You've definitely seen anti-procreation move and shift in the world in a way that I think a lot of other people have not. You've had a unique perspective on the development of the anti-procreative world, what have you. So I was wondering if you could just give us a little rundown, first of all, just sort of what the history of VHEMT is and when it began.
Sure, yeah. I don't consider myself the founder. I'm the finder because it was here. It just wasn't named. So I gave it a name. Now maybe it won't get lost. I used to think that it was ancient, but I read an article saying that the idea of extinction is really pretty recent. Like even Darwin wasn't sure about it. So there have been ancient texts saying that God is upset with us and is going to wipe us out. But that isn't the same thing as people saying, we really should go extinct. Schopenhauer may have been one of the earliest ones. So the idea of the voluntary human extinction movement grew out of my interest in zero population growth and the environment. And they were saying everybody should stop at 2. Well, it's clear we should stop at once. No, none at all. And all of the population awareness movements since then have always said, be sure you don't have more than replacement level, which is of course a myth, or consider having none or one. So they are making progress, but none of them are going to be foolish enough to say, we really got to stop completely, because they got to have some support,
Right, exactly. So for you, sort of the antecedent to yourself would be the zero population growth movement, you would say? Before VHEMT began?
Yes, certainly put me on the right track, but I could see that you don't need to add up too much multiplication and exponential factoring to see that stopping at 2 when our population growth has so much momentum that will not bring about zero population growth for a very, very long time, which is why the organization changed its name to Population Connection.
Right.
They could see it wasn't going to happen.
Just to clarify, would 1991 be an appropriate year to sort of set as perhaps year 1 of VHEMT? Is that correct?
That's the year that is out there a lot. It's because that was the year that I first published These Exit Times.
Right.
I've been promoting voluntary human extinction since the early 70s, but I just called it the human extinction movement then. And it wasn't long before I realized everybody just imagines suicide, mass murder,
right,
that sort of thing. They still do, but at least with the voluntary in front of it, it's a little less intimidating. And it was just a happy coincidence when I put the V on there. I'm going, oh, it's VHEMT. We are.
Yeah. I was wondering about that. That was a happy accident then. It wasn't intentional. Yeah, so 1991, I mean, that is a long time before 2006, which is when David Benatar published Better Never to Have Been. So you really have seen such an incredible change and shift in the way that this idea is processed in the world. You often say, I've heard you say what you just said, which is that, this is not a new idea. This is an idea that has been around for so long, and that it did get, you often say it got lost. And I like that way of phrasing it, because I do also believe that very much, that this is sort of an idea that there is evidence that it keeps getting lost over time. And why do you think that is? Why do you think that the human race sort of comes to a conclusion in these little pockets throughout time, and then it sort of loses itself?
Well, maybe we don't breed, so there's nobody left to carry on. No, not really. But I think the having a name like antinatalism or Voluntary Human Extinction Movement helps a lot, because even Schopenhauer, in his writings, he didn't actually name it, not that I know of. And so we really need to identify it. And there are a lot of ways to get towards antinatalism, the philosophy of it. And more and more of those are encouraging people to get there. The the pro-child-free movement is growing as fast as, if not faster than, antinatalism. And I've kept track of articles over the years of child-free promotion, and I get one here and there. Here. Then about in 2018, it was just overwhelming, and it hasn't stopped yet. They're just constantly articles about people who have decided not to procreate and why. And now that we have the birth strike, although they have a different take on it, but the young woman in Canada who started No Future, No Children, I think that's what it is. And anyway, there are quite a few of them who are saying we aren't going to procreate because the world doesn't look good enough, which is sort of a antinatalist point of view. It's not exactly the same, but pretty close.
What countries or other parts of the this country, America, do you feel VHEMT has had the strongest support or stronghold, per se? I'm not sure how else to phrase it. Are there any specific parts in the world that you see gravitating specifically to VHEMT more than anywhere else?
That would be really difficult to discern, because I hear from people who tell me that they were a part of VHEMT for a decade or two, and I didn't know it. And I think that's the case all over, is that people are finding the website and going, yeah, I agree with that, but there's no need for them to let me know. Now, there are translations in quite a few languages, but that means that at least one person who speaks that language has taken the initiative to translate it, which is wonderful, but it is not an indicator of how many people in that region or who speak that language are part of VHEMT. We're in, there's a discussion group in Spanish and one in French and English, but I think that's it, although they don't have to tell me, so how would I know? So I really couldn't say that any one region is more responsive to the concept than another. I think there are probably an equal number, or pretty much proportionate number, of people all over the world who, when presented with the idea that if humans would just stop procreating voluntarily and we went extinct, then all the other species on the planet would have a chance to recover. I think there's a huge number of people. I hear people agreeing with me all the time when I present it at information tables. They say, yeah, that's true. I mean, I still want to have one, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I did want to say, I mean, it is a really, truly excellent website, the VHEMT website. I mean, the resources that you have on there are great. And I think they're not tapped enough by the rest of the antinatalist movement, really. It is a great archive of all the work that you've done. I suppose that does, because the way that VHEMT is run, if I'm not mistaken, there's no actual way to join per se. You just sort of have it within your understanding, so to speak. Am I correct? Right. There's no membership. There's no dues paid or anything of that sort.
I really hope nobody ever makes an organization out of it, because then they'll just have infighting. I'm the executive director. Yeah, well, I'm the president.
When would you say VHEMT was at its height? Do you think that was sometime in the past? Do you think that it's right now? And how do you measure that?
Oh yeah, it's now, but it's really hard to say it. It's similar to how many people are in what region. But I think it's now because of the internet and so many organizations or movements that are aligned with it. Now, it's kind of disappointing that the climate strikers and the Extinction Rebellion have not come on board. Some have, but the official messaging from them is that to talk about human overpopulation is immediately racist and eugenics and genocide and on and on.
How are you finding it best to communicate with those groups?
Yes, individually, not with the group. They're anthropocentric, pretty much. The extinction that they want to prevent is human extinction. They're rebelling against human extinction. But when I saw, oh boy, Extinction Rebellion, yeah, I'm rebelling for extinction too. But wait a minute, we don't agree on this. So the extinction, they're concerned about the extinction of other species, but mainly because it will cause the extinction of humans. So obviously I'm not concerned about that, although it matters how we get there. If we get there by a collapse of the biosphere, which appears to be the way we're headed, then, it does no good to, at least fewer people would suffer in that time, but we won't have prevented it from happening.
Right, exactly. And we'll definitely talk more later on in what we have planned about sort of where people put that marker as far as who or what various groups or different types of antinatalist thinking, where they place that marker on, what they wish to go extinct, and that does vary significantly from antinatalist thought group to antinatalist thought group, without question.
Sure, yes.
Yeah, huge differences. This might be a bit of an obnoxious question. I hope it's not. But have you ever considered writing like a book about VHEMT? Your experiences, perhaps even just a compilation of the newsletter?
Oh, yes, certainly. Yeah, I'm compiling a lot. When I retire, I intend to really focus on it. While I'm still working, it prevents me from doing the focused, you really have to get it all in your mind at once, although it's too big to do that, but at least sections of it, and then put it all together in a cohesive manner. So yes, I'm the working title is Fresh Hope for Planet and People, Voluntary Human Extinction.
Okay, I love that. All right, I'm really excited to hear that you're doing that. I was hoping that that was in the pipeline for what you are working on. Well, I was going to ask you about this a little later in the interview, but since you brought it up just a little bit ago, I am fascinated by the information tables that you do, and you've been doing them forever. I wasn't sure if you were still doing them, so just to clarify, you do still do those?
Oh yes.
Wow,
unfortunately,
okay.
My favorite one was just canceled due to concerns about the virus. It was I've been going every year for 26 years. Sometimes I'm on panels there. It's called the Public Interest Environmental Law Conference, and it's at the School of Law at the University of Oregon. It's one of the biggest in the country of environmental law conferences, which is why they decided that too many people coming together from all over the world is not a good idea at this time. And since then, lots of things have been canceled. I intend to go to street fairs, and those might not be canceled since they're outside and people can maintain their physical distance.
How many, I mean, I'm certainly not expecting an actual number, but I mean, how many do you think you've done over the years?
Oh, it probably averages 3 or 4 a year.
Okay.
And 20 years? I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know how many I've done really, because sometimes we had a climate strike here by the high school students, and I'm a substitute teacher, so I took the day off to host a table at that. They called it a climate circus? No, I forget what they call it. But anyway, after the climate march and across the bridge from City Hall, there was a party, carnival-like, and I had a table there. That was really interesting because most people had never heard of it. A lot of young people, and of course they're saying, yeah, well, that would be a good idea since we don't have much of a future as it is, do we?
Yeah, I think you're increasingly speaking their language, the language of the young people today, without question.
That's right.
I mean, generally, do you feel that at those tables, the reaction that you're getting is vastly different than the reaction you were getting 20 years ago? Has that changed significantly?
No, it's about the same.
Okay,
people have different reasons slightly, but No, my delivery has changed a little bit, but not much. And people are really receptive to a non-judgmental and positive, voluntary idea. They can take it or leave it. And, you know, it's kind of interesting. I've been at a lot of different ones, but it didn't matter whether it was an anarchist book fair or a place where people are mostly middle class with their kids and strollers. And the reactions are pretty much the same, regardless of the demographics.
Okay, interesting. I mean, have you ever, in the 20 years that you've been doing this, have you ever done like a VHEMT tour of the country or perhaps anywhere outside of the United States?
Oh, no, I couldn't do that. I'm a substitute teacher, and it gives me extra time to do these things, but it doesn't give me extra money. I did get to go to Portugal because they invited me and paid my way for a conference, Forum on the Future, they called it. And that was really wonderful. That was a peak experience. I was in over my head. Those people were, you know, professionals in their field, and here's me, you know. So it was really wonderful to participate in that. And I will, whenever an organization requests me and will pay for my trip, I'll be happy to go there.
How long ago was that you went to that event?
That was November 2017.
Oh, okay. Not too terribly long ago.
No, still fresh in my mind.
I think and I could be completely wrong, I hope I'm not misquoting you, but I think in a previous interview, you said that there were children that were members of VHEMT. Is that true?
Oh, sure. You know, you don't have to be very old to figure this out.
Yeah.
You know, in 1992, there was an article in the Reader's Digest saying how awful VHEMT was. And I met a woman about 17 years later who said, you know, I read that when I was 7 years old, and I thought, yes, and I still do. So, you know, how old do you have to be to figure out that if we weren't here, rest of the biosphere would have a chance to recover?
Well, that is it, because certainly you're right. I don't think it takes being very old or knowing very much at all to come to these conclusions. But I also think that how to talk to children about antinatalistic ideas is definitely a conversation of interest amongst antinatalists, and I think that it's a harder conversation to have for a lot of other forms of antinatalism, because a lot of other forms of antinatalism are more extinction based across the board. I mean, you know, ethylism per se, which is, or sentiocentric antinatalism is about the extinction of all species. So these conversations get a little bit more difficult to have with children. Can you sort of give any pointers, I would say, on how to speak to these to children about these ideas?
Yes, certainly. The way I present it is to say that we can better take care of existing people, existing children included, if we stop making more of us. And that's pretty much it. You know, we can also, this isn't an ethylist thought, of course, we can also better take care of the wildlife and stop taking away their wildlife habitat, taking away their homes for our homes if there were fewer of us instead of more of us. So those are the concepts that children can get behind at any age. Now, if you want to say, well, we really should wipe out all elephants and everything that you love because they suffer, yeah, you're gonna lose the children on that one. You'll lose me on that one.
So I want to talk a little bit about the word antinatalism. I know we've certainly discussed it a little bit previously, but you know, as you know, antinatalism is this word that kind of came up at some point. It is still not an official piece of language in any English dictionary. It does have a very sort of strange history that I think people are still attempting to chart. When was the first time you heard the word antinatalism, and what is your personal understanding of the history of the term?
Yeah, I don't know when it was, you know, maybe 20 years ago. A friend of mine was working in a school as a sign language interpreter, and he said, have you heard of antinatalism? And he had the book Confessions of an Antinatalist, which was written by somebody in our town, and I hadn't.
It's Jim Crawford.
Yes, correct. And of course, I tuned into it right away. It's like, yeah, great. Another philosophy that will promote not procreating. I don't care why somebody doesn't procreate, as long as they don't procreate.
Do you consider yourself an antinatalist? And if so, is it a term that you were hesitant at all to adopt?
It's something I agree with. It's not something that I am. I don't. It's not my identity. Kind of like anarchy. Sometimes I say, "Oh yeah, I'm an anarchist," but really, I agree with anarchist thought. It's not. None of these philosophies are my identity. But I definitely agree with antinatalism. I've yet to see a cogent argument against the philosophy. I've seen a lot of people try, and they never succeeded.
How, in your opinion, did the appearance of antinatalism and the term antinatalism change VHEMT, if at all?
You know, I think most of these ideas are things that join people rather than people joining them. If you present the concept of antinatalism to somebody who'd never ever considered it, if they already have a leaning to that perspective, they'll say, yeah, okay, sign me up. I go along with that. But if it's a hardcore natalist, you probably won't get much traction on that. In fact, natalism, we should talk about that, because that's what we're up against, is natalism. That is so deep and deeply ingrained. Births are an unquestioned good, period. It permeates all societies, and that's what we're up against.
Yes, without question. Incidentally, the word natalism, when did you first hear that word? Because I am trying to figure out how old of a term even that is.
Yeah, I was using pronatalism at the information tables in the law conference one time, and Nina Paley was with me, and she said natalism. I said, oh yeah, you don't need to say pronatalism. So that's when I started saying natalism, but I don't remember how long ago I identified the concept of we should procreate. That's good.
Okay, interesting. Or maybe she unintentionally coined the term. We'll definitely talk about her movie in a little bit, which I love, by the way. Thank you for not reading. Yeah, she's fabulous. In your opinion, if you could have your way, how should antinatalism be defined?
Well, I guess we have to define it as being against natalism. Just, you know, people can take it any way they want after that and be ethicist and they have anthropocentric. No. Anyway, there are various forms of it, but basically it is against the idea that births are good and in favor of the concept that we have no right to bring someone into the world where they are not suffering where they are, but they will suffer when they get here. And you can take it from there. It's kind of like VHEMT. It's simple. We stop breeding, we go extinct. Of course, from that leads to all kinds of philosophical ideas and questions.
As antinatalism has developed, and as the anti-procreative world has developed, I would say especially over the last 10 years, I would say that there is, that it has often moved away from really any sense of environmentalism, which of course is a humongous, tremendous piece of what VHEMT is about. Do you feel a sense of disappointment that that's happened?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay.
No, antinatalism is specifically, it is one major route to the awareness that we should go extinct. And so is concern for the environment, concern for non-human animals, concern for wildlife, concern for humans. All of these are routes to the concept of humans voluntarily going extinct. And antinatalism is however people want to define it. You know, I'm not disappointed in that. People have different thoughts. That's the way it is. It's the way the world is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, yeah, that's more than fair. What do you consume as far as the world of antinatalism? What are your circles that you are active in the antinatal world online?
Yeah, I try to listen to this podcast called Exploring Antinatalism whenever they come
Interesting.
out with something. But
Thank you, Les.
no, I don't promote antinatalism specifically. And I don't even get into very much, just think of what a horrible world we're creating for, and if you give somebody a birth, they're going to die in it. I try to keep VHEMT as positive as possible. And even though I agree that life is suffering and we shouldn't bring somebody into it, when I am presenting the concept, that is not the first place I go. If they want to go there, that's great. I'll go along with them. But I don't like talking about how we're going to hell in a handbasket and we shouldn't put another baby in the basket. It's just too negative. And even though it's true, it's not necessary. I really like to talk about what a wonderful world it'll be when there are fewer of us each day instead of more, and we can provide for everybody's needs, and we won't be taking nature's habitat for our habitat, and it could be a wonderful world.
So you must find the Facebook groups rather horrific then.
I do, absolutely.
Yeah, they are.
Yes, especially, people applauding this new virus, oh boy, boomer remover. I had to laugh at that one because I'm a boomer, and I am in a very susceptible, my job, of course, school's closed now because of it, but, in my age, I'm 72, and if I do get it, I'm in the high mortality range. I don't see death as a positive at all. We'll get there soon enough. There's no sense pushing it along. It's not ever going to make a difference.
Yeah, I agree with you tremendously. I really do hate that strain of the conversation that's applauds every natural disaster and every disease and every awful thing that befalls an infant or a parent, and it's just it is a toxic element of this anti-procreative community that we're all sort of enmeshed in one way or another, and
Right.
it is hard to know how to deal with it at some points, because it is a very loud voice within our community.
Yes, it could be whistling past the graveyard. I think a lot of times people put up a front like that when really they have a more serious fear of death than people who don't.
It's a bad time. The students that you interact with, do they know that you are the head of the Voluntary Human Extinction Movement? Do you speak with them at all about that?
I don't. I have always kept it completely separate, almost secret. But a couple of the AP environmental teachers have shared my video with Tucker Carlson, where poor guy just couldn't get it. And so they do that because it brings up ideas about exotic invaders and human influence, and it's a good discussion starter, even though it's only like 5 minutes long. So I have to say, well, yeah, okay, but you can go to the website and find out all about it. I don't need to tell you. So I think of students as a captive audience, and anybody who goes in trying to change their minds. Well, in high school, the students won't stand for it, but they're too hip for that. But no, it's unethical.
It's unethical to speak with them about it, you think? Yeah, in your position.
Yes, for me to try to convince them that they should not procreate.
Right, absolutely. No, I know where you're coming from with that. You just spoke about the Tucker Carlson interview, which I have watched many times. Actually, it is quite it is quite a video.
It's funny.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, no. So I mean, I think that it really you really deserve the credit. I feel that I think you have done more radio, more television, more articles, more web appearances, what have you, in the public eye, talking about your version of anti-procreation, antinatalism, probably than anybody else in the world. I think maybe the only other one that rivals how much media you've done on this subject is maybe Théophile de Garoux in Belgium, and of course Rafael Samuel. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he's got you beat. And you've taken an incredible amount of shit from people.
Oh, it's fun. I don't take them seriously.
No, you take it in amazing stride. I mean, you've probably been told to kill yourself more than on national television, more than any other antinatalist in the world. And I really would love to know how you deal with this. And for so long, and you always do it in the most calm, collected, cool way, and it's just very admirable.
Well, no, as a teacher, I have grown to consider the process more important than the goal. And so when I'm talking with somebody who says, well, why don't you kill yourself? I treat it as if you're the first person who has ever said that to me. And I give them an answer. I give them as good an answer as I can and acknowledge their concern. Although really they're trying to, well, if you hate people so much, why don't you just kill yourself? But I don't have to take it that way, and I can turn it around into something more positive. It's a challenge, but I enjoy it because of that.
Well, I mean, that's an amazing attitude to have about it. And it definitely shows. As I've said, you've probably done more of this media than anybody else I can think of. And I just am very curious how you've managed to attract so much media attention over the years. What is your secret?
I think one of the main reasons is that there are people on the right who really want to find somebody that they can use as a punching bag and show just how wacky those environmentalists can get. And so I know that going in. And then I try to turn it around and get my idea in there. I think a lot of people are wise not to go on these programs because that's all they want. They know that's what they want to do. And I've seen, and really it's unfortunate, Tucker Carlson and some of the others really have beat up on some people who weren't, I don't know, prepared for it. Maybe they need to have a friend insult them and really give them a bad time until they can finally take it. As a substitute teacher, I have received some a little abuse, not as bad as the myth goes on, but it has caused me to look at the person, not at their behavior, and identify why are they doing that. Now with these right-wing talk show people, it's obvious why they're doing it. They want to keep people watching, and they want to get their point across. They want to own the libs, and I'm their target. And it's okay as long as you don't take it too seriously and you don't internalize their ignorance.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. So basically what you're saying is being around children has made you the perfect antinatalist.
Right.
So very interesting. Okay, children are the way. I get it. Mark, did you want to ask anything?
Yeah, well, when I heard about the organization not having a board of directors and stuff like that, what was the reasoning behind that?
You're speaking of the Voluntary Human Extinction Movement?
Yeah.
Yes, that's because it's a movement and not an organization. I've seen organizations in the past come and go. There was one called the National Organization of Non-Parents, and they were doing okay, and they had newsletter for a long time. And then they got into an argument over who was in charge, and they were at each other's throats on the board and who had the authority. And the next thing you know, it was all over.
Yeah, organizations do have that issue. How are you able to organize with a group though, without a structure?
Yeah, no, there's no need to organize. I have information tables quite often, and anybody can do that, and I'll help them do it. A lot of people are just sharing the information among their friends and so on. I think person to person is the best way to share the concept. I don't know what we would do as an organization. I mean, there are already organizations that are working for reproductive freedom, which is a very important aspect of voluntary human extinction. We can't encourage people not to procreate if they don't have the wherewithal not to procreate. Well, we don't need to do that. Planned Parenthood International, Marie Stopes, there are quite a few organizations that are doing that.
And your social media, when it comes to like, you have a Facebook group, right?
There is a Facebook group, yes, but I'm not on it. There's actually several of them.
And do like other people manage that?
Yes, they do. There's one that's not managed.
Okay. I was just curious how that's run without structured management, but cool.
I believe Théophile de Guéraud runs the French one, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice.
So anybody can do it. You start one up and there you go.
I was just going to ask, like, do you take in donations to do tours or anything like that?
Yes, but I have to make sure that I don't take in more money than I spend. If I did, I'd have to start doing taxes. I don't want to do that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever considered doing like a Patreon? Because I think you can set a limit to what you take in on that site.
No, I don't need money. I'm just not interested in that aspect of it. I get money for the bumper stickers that covers buying more bumper stickers, and I think it works out just about right.
Yeah, I had a question about you mentioned Extinction Rebellion being more concerned about humans not being extinct. What is your take on the environmental contingent of the vegan movement?
That's as good a reason as any. Vegans kind of like VHEMT or antinatalism. There are a lot of ways that people can go, and I don't think it matters whether it's for their health, for the environment, for the animals suffering that goes on, and any of the above. If someone chooses to give up eating meat, they're doing a good thing, I think, as far as all of those things. So I don't pick and choose. If somebody wants to, whatever they feel is right.
Are you personally vegan?
No, I'm vegetarian, but I limit the lacto-ovo.
Okay.
Are you vegan?
I am. I'm skeptical of using the word sometimes.
Yeah, right.
The movement is, I don't know where the movement's going, so.
Well, plant-based diet is what some of my friends use because they're not vegan. They just don't eat animal products.
Yeah, I thought about using the word plant-based, but I'm concerned about the treatment of animals. So if I said I was plant-based, it still doesn't take into account, say, circuses and other ways of exploiting animals. So
right.
I think I am stuck with calling myself a vegan for now.
I'm a vegan.
It's okay. We can be. I don't think any less of you. Right?
But the other thing is, like, not all, like, some of the vegans are okay with procreating, right? So
for sure.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like antinatalism, right? We're all kind of stuck with each other, but we believe vastly different things, and but that kernel of an idea in the middle of it is we all share. But everything else surrounding it is a mess.
You both talked about the coronavirus, right? And some people were calling it like boomer remover. And,
yeah, right.
At the same time, if you look at Benatar's work, he argues multiple places where death is a harm to a person, and this is not a good thing, and that's part of the human predicament. So we should not be happy when people are, dying.
Yeah, I think they have a different perspective on it. They're thinking fewer humans, good, period. So I think, if you are an antinatalist because you are opposed to suffering, then you certainly can't applaud a virus that comes along and kills people.
Have you seen anybody do that in the VHEMT community?
On the VHEMT Facebook group, but not everybody in that is a VHEMTer. It was put open to anybody so that people could discuss it. And I'm not the moderator of it anymore. I would probably just shut it down if I were.
Yeah, so I mean, part of the reason why I was asking about like your very admirable, again, ability to sort of take criticism, to take to sort of be a punching bag for this group, for the alt-right, as you said, that does give you a platform on their shows and whatnot, is because the vast majority of antinatalists that I know of, really any description, whatever type of antinatalist that they are, there's a tremendous amount of fear about talking about this subject in public at all. A tremendous amount of fear. The vast majority of antinatalists that I know, if they make a YouTube video, they take down their YouTube video. If they post somewhere about it, they take down the post about it. They're terrified of speaking in public in any given circumstance about this subject. And that's why I've always felt like with you and with VHEMT in general, like activism has definitely, to me, been one of the strongest components of what VHEMT brings. And I wish that more of antinatalism like took cues from what you're doing, you know, and took some of the bravery that you show. So it's a bit of an obvious question, but it's a question I'll ask nonetheless. I mean, why do you think there is so much fear in the antinatalist community?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe it's the way they're presenting it. I mean, yeah, well, nobody wants to be an outcast and lose their community. It's a very important human need. But if we present our ideas with respect, find a way that people can understand it, and don't be too aggressive about it, which would be threatening, and then they would, you know, get return the favor. I don't see how anybody could really hate somebody for having a different idea. You just have to present it in a way that is. Well, you know, if you present it online, you're going to get all of that stuff, no matter how you present it. You know, it's just part of the deal. So if somebody can't take that, if they are very sensitive to it, then they shouldn't do it. But in person, if you're just talking with somebody and they say, well, yeah, I identify as an antinatalist, I just don't think we should bring people into the world because they're, you know, probably going to suffer. Guaranteed.
Yeah, no, that's a very good insight. I don't know what to do about it. I really feel like it is the next to natalism, the fear problem is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for any version of this movement. The fact that people are so afraid and won't talk about it, I think is one of the things that may damn it in the end. I don't know. Do you feel similarly about that, or?
They need to figure out who they're talking to. So if you're going to talk to your parents about it, you have to start off by saying that you're not blaming them, although the guy in India who did and sued his parents, or tried to, was thrown out of court, tried to sue his parents for bringing him into the existence without his permission. But you have to let them know, as I did with my parents, let them know that it's not them. It's not that you had a bad childhood. It's that you're thinking of the future, and in the future, you don't think that people should create more of us, and then they don't feel threatened by it, because most people, when they're trying on a new idea, will try it on themselves and go, oh, wait a minute, you're saying that I am a bad person for giving birth to you? So you want to get that out of the way first, and that's probably true with even people that aren't your parents. Just well, especially if they've already procreated, you don't want to tell them what a horrible thing they've done.
Yeah, you spoke a little bit about this previously, the information booths that you have, which again I'm extremely intrigued by, and it's something that I would like to do myself. Actually, I really would like to move to a more not off the internet, but I want to do more live activism for the subject of antinatalism. So if somebody is interested in doing a booth, I don't know that I necessarily would do a booth about VHEMT specifically, but can you give any pointers about how to start that kind of endeavor? And if somebody was interested in, say, doing a booth about VHEMT specifically, do they come to you? Do you help them set that up?
The first thing they need to do is to go to the VHEMT site, where there's a page on outreach. In fact, it's called outreach.htm. and they will get all kinds of tips on how to present the concept, and they can take it or leave it as much as they want. And if somebody wants to apply any of those ideas to an antinatalist table, I think that'll work too. I try to limit the discussion at our information tables to VHEMT. I've had volunteers who were vegans who wanted to promote that idea, and some people were offended, and I'm going, no, this is not what we're about, please. So if somebody's main agenda was antinatalism and they were a volunteer at the VHEMT table, I might bench them for a while until I can say, look, you can't be pushing that particular idea as the main thing.
Okay, yeah, interesting. Although I have to say, I would love to do that. I'd love to do some sort of booth or some sort of thing like that, where you have a representative from the four corners of the anti-procreative world, so to speak. Like you have VHEMT, you have child free, you have antinatalism proper, and then you have a more ephilistic, sentiocentric, or just full antinatalist perspective, all in one place.
It'd make a great panel or a table if everybody could be there at the same time, although the visitors would probably be overwhelmed.
Yeah, they probably would be, but I think it would be incredible. I hope to see that happen in the future.
Yeah.
Just sort of a meeting of the antinatal minds, in some sort of public space. I really think that needs to happen at some point.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. Carlos, sorry, Les, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to say this conference that was canceled, if it's in again next year, they offer people the opportunity to present a concept for a panel, and they are really open to different ideas. Well, obviously, because I've been on several panels, and they're not, they don't shy away from controversial ideas, and it is likely that a panel discussion presenting the concept of antinatalism would be accepted, and then there's an audience, and it's usually 15 minutes of Q&A afterwards, and they last about an hour and 15 minutes. So it's a short time, but I'd recommend it.
I just wanted to know your thoughts about Rafael Samuel. He was the young man in India that threatened to sue his parents and created a humongous international media storm around the subject of antinatalism. Nothing of that sort had ever really happened. What was that like for you, witnessing?
Oh, that was great. I always love it. Just love to see that sort of thing going on. And he put together child-free, antinatalism, and VHEMT all together into one. I see no problem with that. Mix and match them however you want. And of course, his parents are attorneys, and he knew he was never going to win the case. And they were on good terms through the whole thing. And it was thrown out of court, and the court threatened him with a fine for bringing frivolous matters to the court. But that doesn't matter. They got, as you say, international attention. It really sparked an interest in a lot of people. And who knows how many of those people went away thinking, yeah, come to think of it, he's got a point there. So I think it was wonderful that he did that.
Yeah, it was incredible. It was really like nothing I'd ever seen. I do think that it does speak to the value, in my opinion, of an artistic approach mixed with this subject in any way, shape, or form. I'm curious to know what you feel, if any, is the value of an artistic approach as far as VHEMT and antinatalism goes.
Oh yeah, I think it's very important to include art and humor and philosophy, mix all of it together. You'll appeal to more people that way. If they are more interested in art, and you've got some art, and you've entered that door into their mind, into their subconscious. And it also makes it a lot more fun for us if we can mix in humor, art, philosophy, all of the above.
Are there any VHEMT creators that we might not know about working in the internet or off that you'd like to tell us about. I don't know of too many VHEMT YouTube channels, although there are a few. But I'm always curious to know of active members of VHEMT and what they're doing.
Yeah, I am too. As far as the artists, maybe they're intimidated by Nina Paley's artistic creations and contribution. They're going, oh, I can't beat that. That she's moved on to do full-length animated musicals and has, become rather famous in her own right. Well, she was before, but now really we're still using, she gave so much of her artistic talent to VHEMT that I'm using it. I'll continue to use it, but I don't know of others who are doing it.
So I've been running these meetups on antinatalism here in London, UK. And I noticed that, I'm happy to just meet other antinatalists and have a chat about various concepts and kind of try to learn more about it and see other perspectives. But there's lots of people who come in who come to meetings with strictly kind of activist intentions, right? So they just get there and they say, we need to end procreation, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm trying to find kind of the best way to direct these people and kind of give them tips and give them ideas on things they can do. Although I'm also interested in some of those ideas. To be honest, a lot of them come from a vegan background. So they kind of have kind of the history or kind of the practice of being vegan activists, which, vegan activism has gained a lot of traction these days. I'm a vegan myself, but I haven't engaged not nearly as much activism as these guests I have at my meetups. So what would you say to them is like I guess the best way for them to do activism, considering, they live in a big city like London?
Yes, that is a challenge. A lot of people see what's wrong with the world and want to fix it, and they don't have a lot of patience with it. They, want to do it now. I've seen people in the population awareness movement come in and they're saying, Les, I see what you're doing here, but I don't have that kind of patience. I think the time is running out. We got to get busy on this. In a few years, they're going, I've had it. I can't do this anymore. They've burned themselves out because, you've got to be patient. This is going to take our lifetimes and more probably it's a process. And the first thing I would ask them to do is to give up and not think that they're going to make a difference. And then they can begin making a difference.
Okay, that makes sense.
Good.
Thank you. So,
Okay.
So Les, I'm kind of in the same age bracket as Amanda, I think. And I've been online since '97, right? Which kind of sounds like the prehistory of the internet. And it was actually through your website that I decided to not breed. So there you go.
Yay!
I read it. I would say, I think I found it in like 2000. I would have been like 22 or 23 years old.
Uh-huh.
And I was living in Portugal at the time. So there was no antinatalist resources whatsoever.
Right.
So all the antinatalist resource I had was basically reading Schopenhauer in my local library. Because books were expensive, right? And
Right.
And I found the website, and then I decided, okay, I'm going to get a vasectomy.
Yay! One less human.
Yeah, exactly. Well, a few, I guess. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah, really. No way of knowing.
less 1.5 or whatever humans. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But
That's
it's
the
funny how
average.
these things work out, right? Sometimes
Yes.
we do things which, we think are not having an impact, but there's somebody somewhere that came across, a podcast maybe, or an information booth or a flyer.
Yes.
And he kind of just got them thinking.
It's really good to hear that because you go along and you don't know how much impact you're having. But I have had people come to the information booth at street fairs, and one guy came with his wife, and he said, we saw you here a couple of years ago, and I just wanted to tell you I got my vasectomy. And of course, I gave him the Meritorious Service Award for doing so. And his wife had read the chart that I have, Why Breed? offering reasons, alternative for breeding. If you want to do this, well, you could do this instead. And she said it suggested that she become a big brother, big sister, whatever the version is in other countries. And so she turned her desire to take care of children into being a big sister to a needy child.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And
it was wonderful.
And this week, I don't know if you're aware, the Portuguese language antinatalist group in Facebook has just hit 100,000 members.
Wow! Congratulations.
I mean, that's a lot of people, right?
That is. Goodness.
That's a lot of people. So,
yeah, and
these ideas have impact. I've seen a lot of your material on that group being posted, but translated into Portuguese.
Uh-huh.
So,
well, and Brazil as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's mostly Brazil. Yeah.
I just yesterday somebody sent a translation of the first page of the VHEMT website in Portuguese, and so yesterday I converted it to HTML and posted it. So there's a fresh translation of Portuguese now on the VHEMT website.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Awesome.
I mean, you think about, for example, European countries. I mean, most of them have very low birth rates, although, obviously over zero, which is not good.
Right. Yeah.
But you often think about the impact you can have. And if I said, if I'm gonna do activism in Portuguese language, I would have much bigger impact in Brazil than Portugal. Right? Portugal has like
Correct.
a 1.3 birth rate, whereas Brazil is much higher than that. So. You gotta put our efforts where they have the most impact, I guess, right?
Well, I think it's everywhere. Even countries with a 1.2 birth rate, a lot of times they're still increasing. The momentum of population growth is such that even though we are told constantly the country is below replacement level, we're not having enough babies to replace each other. That's what they're saying about the US. And really, we are increasing, our natural increase is almost 1 million per year, even with 1.7 total fertility rate. It's because of the momentum. We're having fewer, but there are more of us having fewer. So it still increases.
All right. So Amanda, I think the next section we had was about the film. Is that right?
Yeah, it's about the film.
Yeah,
it's about the film. I'll jump into that. I just wanted to make one comment just based on what you were talking about, Carlos, if you don't mind. Just about how, VHEMT was how you found out about this topic, really. And I just wanted to just say how important that is and how important people realize that that's the case for so many people. Because I think that as anti-procreation in general has developed over the last 10 years, the conclusion of so many antinatalists of various descriptions is very far away from VHEMT. It's not environmentalist. It's often about sentient extinction. It doesn't share the same conclusion. And I think for that reason, over time, unfortunately, and I hate to say this, VHEMT has been sort of undervalued and underappreciated and underestimated. But I think that it really deserves to be recognized what a important introduction VHEMT has served, like, for so many people over the last 20 some odd years. I just think it really deserves recognition for that. I mean, there's so many people who would not have come to these ideas at all without VHEMT. And
well, thank you very much, Amanda. That is what that's my life's work, is promoting VHEMT. So I really appreciate that those words of encouragement.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it really does deserve to be recognized without question. Okay, so we'll move on to the film. So what can you tell me about the film? Of course, is Thank You for Not Breeding. It is a film project by Nina Paley. It is available on YouTube, and I will put a link below. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, a link to the film will be below. What can you tell me about Nina Paley, and how did this film project come about?
Yes, she wanted to make a full-length film, and so she created this one in order to raise money for it. And that never happened, so she moved on to other things. But we are left with this, I think it's 20 minutes long, movie, which stands on its own. Chris Korda gives, he's very passionate, they are very passionate about species extinction, and it makes a nice little piece. I think I was far too serious in it. I guess the way I was interviewed, it was too serious. I wasn't joking around enough. But her cartoons are in there, and I think The Stork is my all-time favorite of just about any way of presenting the concept of what we are doing to the world through our procreation.
Yeah, the animations are incredible in that movie.
Yes.
And I don't know. I think that you, it was such a striking contrast between your interview and Chris Korda. And I thought I don't know. I didn't think you were overly serious. I thought your attitude made sense. That's just my impression.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. What, if anything, did the creation of this movie change for VHEMT? Did it lead to a lot more people learning about the idea? And did it see any festival play? Do you know if it played publicly at any point?
It probably did, but not that I know of. That wasn't what it was for. It was a fundraiser, and so we did. I showed it in Oakland one time to a pretty good couple hundred people, and but they weren't really, funding. It was fun to show it. Nina would have showed it, but she had taken ill that day, so that was why I hosted it myself. And the idea was that others could show it as well, and that it would finally get into the hands and eyes of somebody with some money who would say, yeah, I'll bankroll that. It's not a subject that really lends itself to producers kicking in the money. There have been several documentary filmmakers who have shot video of me and even gone to the table and done recordings there, and then put it together to take two funders. And they just never find somebody who's willing to put out the money, not yet anyway, to make a movie about VHEMT.
Well, I sort of have a feeling like that might change based on the kind of coverage that somebody like Rafael Samuel got, and the level of media coverage that, it's a different version perhaps of the subject we're talking about, but anti-procreation in general certainly is more in the public eye. And as somebody who has also made an antinatalist movie, I mean, and just sort of watching how all that's developing, I do kind of feel like we might be on the cusp of something like that, and I hope so.
I think the movie could easily be made if it included VHEMT, antinatalism, the child-free movement, all of these things together, instead of trying to make a movie out of just one element. And we now there's so much in the realm of child-free. And someone just did make a movie on that one. It was To Kid or Not to Kid. Yeah. And, that was just that one idea. But yes, a movie definitely could be made of all of the ideas combined.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think that desperately needs to happen. I hope that it does happen. I really would love to see that come to some fruition. And yeah, there's more than one child-free movie now. I can't think of the names of them offhand, but yeah, that area of the idea certainly has seen so much. Yeah, I just think it's bound to happen at some point.
Yeah, and I think all these strategies, if you will, or kind of philosophies and ideas, they do kind of overlap in some way, but they have completely different optics, which help strategically. For example, in women's magazines, you do get a lot of articles about child-free, where it's presented as a sort of a neutral thing.
Yes.
But if you were to put an article on voluntary extinction in a women's magazine, I think you wouldn't be as neutral as a child-free article.
I did one. I did. I was in Refinery 28 or 26, whatever the hell it is. That's a women's magazine. I was talking about antinatalism.
All right, that's
It's possible.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. I mean, I'm just going to say that for the reader, if the reader is, reading something about antinatalism and the perception is, look, this will give you more time. Don't have this pressure to have kids because just other people tell you you'll live your life, have a career, etc. It's different from we should wipe out humanity, right?
Yes, right.
Exactly. It's very different optics, and it's kind of for a different audience.
Right.
Whereas, for example, for the people who I was telling you about, who showed to my London antinatalist meetup, there's a lot of vegans, and their kind of intro to it is more of, I would say, your perspective less, where they say, Earth would be better off without humans. So, if there were no more humans through not procreating, then, the animals would have their habitat back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, and we wouldn't have all the livestock, domesticated animals and so on.
Yeah, those species, I guess, domesticated species will go extinct. We can go back to wild species who kind of preserve themselves, et cetera. So I mean, there's all these different optics with, I would say, a similar end goal. And so to me, it makes sense to kind of coordinate efforts, if you will.
Good, me too.
I want to just ask two questions sort of revolving around the Church of Euthanasia. I hadn't really realized that you and Chris Korda of the Church of Euthanasia had such a disagreement and some beef as far as how the message was being delivered to people until I watched the movie. I did love their interview. I think certainly they said some very interesting things that I appreciated, some of which I completely disagreed with too, of course. But I'm just curious if you are still in communication with the Church of Euthanasia to this day, and what you think of what that group has become and how it's developed.
Oh, yes, I'm still in contact with Chris. We never actually got to meet. I would love to have met them. And they're pursuing music more, and I think they have been collaborating with somebody who wants to make the movie about the Church of Euthanasia, which I think would be so wonderful. It was such a phenomenon. Any group that when they show up at a protest where anti-abortion and pro-choice people are, and both groups want them to go away, now that's classy, really. As far as the disagreement on presentation, that was really no big deal. Chris thought that VHEMT was too what do you call it? National Public Radio style, but that is the style that I intentionally use, because it's a contrast between an idea that most people would find anathema combined with a very pleasant presentation. I think it's more, I think it's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. There is this sense in the movie that both you and Chris Korda are so public. It's so out in the open, public demonstrations, performance art. It's like everything that I've dreamed of for the last 10 years. And maybe that's just, the effect of the way the movie sets it up. But we did talk a little bit about this previously, but why do you think antinatalism isn't quite as open? That so much of that sort of went away. It just seems like both of you, both groups sort of hit a moment in time where that sort of publicness with this topic was possible in a way that it just seems not to be right now.
Well, I have to give Chris the credit for that. He and his compadres, including Vermin Supreme, got together and brainstormed how to do it, and they just did it. That's all it takes. Somebody has to do it. I mean, you have to have the idea too. I mean, going to a sperm bank and committing spermicide on the front steps of their building. I mean, that's just pure genius. And of course, I don't think it made the newspapers, but anyway, people just have to do it. Get together. And Carlos, your group where they want to be active, ask them if maybe they could think about some way that attention could be brought to the idea in a artistic way, and maybe, you know, get together on a brainstorm about it and figure out something. I don't know if it'd be along the same lines as the Church of Euthanasia. They were really big on outrage.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We do have somebody who makes antinatalist YouTube videos in public, who's got a bit of notoriety at least. But yeah, there's more things we definitely want to do. And you know, within reason, no publicity is bad publicity, right?
Yes, right. I think the person you might be talking about has a speaker and harangues people about it until they engage with him.
Yeah, that's right. Danny Shine.
Danny Shine.
Yeah.
He's when he started, he wasn't talking about antinatalism. That's a concept that he came across, I think about a year ago, but he's just taken to that like a fish to water, and he's kind of, you know, in the middle of busy London streets going, why'd you want to reproduce? Is there anything special about you? And people get very upset.
Oh, of course they do. My genes are great. What are you talking about?
But he's been doing this for years, so he's very calm, I guess. So
yes.
That's his trait. He just faces people and just kind of tries to make a joke out of it.
Yeah.
So, but you know, there's other things we want to do.
Oh yes, there is. Your imagination,
yeah,
the only limitation. But I think it does have to be fun, or you will be burned out on it in a short time, and it will be an unpleasant experience. You need to make sure that it has heart and it's fun, and you're not making people feel bad.
So maybe now it's a good time to talk about the future of Voluntary Human Extinction Movement. So do you think there's been like a lot of talk about antinatalism recently? Has that impacted your movement as well in terms of hits and kind of engagement?
Not that I know of. It's possible. You know, I haven't checked the statistics for the website in a month or two, but it's always held pretty steady, and then has a peak whenever I, you know, get to be on Fox News or something. But I can't say that I have seen any change.
Okay. Recently, there was a book published by a British author called Patricia McCormack. Have you heard of her?
Oh, yes. And I thought, oh boy, somebody beat me to the punch. I wanted to publish the VHEMT book, but her book is entirely different. The excerpts that I've been able to read, the world is big enough for both of our books.
Oh, absolutely. Actually, we are going to interview her in about a month from now.
Oh, good.
Do you have anything you'd like to ask her?
I'll send it in if I think of it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I'll definitely let you know closer to time that Carlos is going to be interviewing her. We'd love to have questions from you for her. That'd be great. Okay, so moving on to some of the future of VHEMT stuff. So Sentiocentric antinatalism has vastly become more and more of a thing over the last 10 years. Forms of antinatalism that extend to all sentient life. And there's certainly been a lot of resistance, as much as there's been a lot of people that side with that view. And I sort of get the impression that that when people reject a certain amount of the sentiocentric antinatalism, they're siding with a kind of vehement attitude. And I don't know. I just am curious if you have seen some evidence that there's sort of a renaissance of vehement happening, where there are people that have sort of rejected a more sentiocentric view and are more consciously saying that they've rejected it and wish to adopt an antinatalist view like VHEMT that wishes for the animals to inherit the earth, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Yes, I have not. I have not seen that at all. As far as it could easily exist, though. I don't have an insight to what a lot of people are thinking. But as far as VHEMT goes, it goes in waves. And right now I'm about at the end of a wave of media interests based on an article that I wrote for the Guardian's weekend magazine called Experience. They did change a few words, even though it's all written in first person. Editors, they feel they can do that. But from that, then a lot of other media, they're always looking for something to put between the ads. And so I got quite a bit of interest out of that. And it's about over. I think there's this one, but that's not why you didn't contact me, because of the article in the Guardian. But yeah, it goes in phases, and I don't consider that an indication of how well the movement as a whole is doing. That's just the ups and downs of media attention.
I see. Yeah. No, but I have read the Guardian article, certainly. And
good.
Yeah, and can you tell me about a little bit about the media attention that article got you recently?
Oh, I'd have to go to the website and see. It's
oh, that's okay. I'm sorry. I just more meant, I know that you recently on Fox News, and if maybe you could speak a little bit about your Fox News engagement.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was just your very typical. I mean, I don't know where they clone these guys. He worked for Bill O'Reilly, and I guess he figured he could be another Bill O'Reilly. I don't know, but they're all pretty much the same.
Yeah, he's like Tucker Carlson, like 2.0, 5.0.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, so I knew what he was going to ask. Although he did ask a new one that I hadn't. They always have these gotcha questions, and so he said, do you have siblings? And I told him, well, I have 7.8 billion siblings. No, you know what I mean. So he says, do you have any biological siblings? I said, yeah, I got 4 of them. He said, well, which one do you wish hadn't been born? There's a new gotcha. So I told him I was really happy that my dad got a vasectomy before he had any more, because it was hard enough to take care of 5 kids on a teacher's salary. So he moved on to another one, didn't get him on that one. So it was funny.
Yeah, they act like you haven't heard all this before and haven't been doing it for 20 years. It's
actually, the very first thing he started out with was a version of "Why Don't You Kill Yourself?" So
I noticed that. Yeah.
Oh, you saw that one?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it's always around the corner somewhere. They're ready to slip it in like it's some genius. I even thought of that. Yeah.
That's free space on the bingo card.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it would be hilarious if it wasn't so depressing.
Right.
Well, out of curiosity, what are your thoughts on the right to die?
Well, I think everyone has a right to die.
Yeah.
We need to have better mental health care so that not as many people as do kill themselves do, because a lot of those it's a temporary situation that they just can't find help with. The last one I knew of, they tried to contact the suicide hotline and were referred somewhere else because they were in another state and they just didn't get the job done, and so they went ahead on it. Or 16 years old. So I think even though the right to die is just a basic human right, we still need to help people who are struggling. It shouldn't be in the top 10 causes of death.
Do you have any big plans or events that you have in mind for the future?
No.
Okay.
Just the tables, the information tables. That's pretty much it. We don't have get-togethers.
Right. Okay. What do you think the next 5 years, 10 years, what does the future hold for VHEMT and antinatalism, but VHEMT specifically?
Yeah, I think an increasing awareness, especially among young people, as they put more and more together. They are becoming well aware of the future through the climate strike and also Extinction Rebellion. And if they are not going to see much improvement, and I doubt they will, then it's going to become clear that procreating is not going to help the situation, and they can spend more time trying to make the situation better if they're not spending it all raising an offspring.
I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the subject of wild animal suffering and the sentiocentric antinatalism. Certainly, I mean, I know this is the biggest disagreement that we have as far as the sentiocentric antinatalism and VHEMT. It's a humongously different perspective.
Sure.
That I know that you've been. I mean, you and Edmendum did an interview together on Vloggerdome, which was my old show that I did with Gary years ago. So I know that you're aware of this perspective.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So the biggest difference between most of modern antinatalism and hefilism, sentiocentric antinatalism, and VHEMT is that VHEMT wants the animal, the human beings to go extinct, the biosphere to recover, and for the animals to inherit the earth, so to speak. And sentiocentric antinatalism, hefilism, antinatalism proper, some of the time, wishes for the animals to also go extinct. I am an ethicist. I am a sentiocentric antinatalist. I do believe that it would literally be the worst tragedy, the most villainous ethical misstep of human beings if we allowed ourselves to go extinct before the animals. They have no ability to protect themselves. As awful as human beings are, as much as we've failed, as much as the carnage that we have created, we are the only thing in the universe that we know of that has this possibility of doing what I feel to be the right thing, which is in some ethical, peaceful manner, trying to come up with a plan of how do you save animal life. And by saving, I mean preventing more of it and allowing the other species that are capable of suffering just the same way we are, getting them out of the situation of life. I can't help but feel a responsibility to that end. What are your thoughts on that? I know that's a lot.
Yes, yeah, it is.
Yes, apologize.
We didn't. Gary and I didn't have a chance to pursue it, but his position was that 99% of the suffering happens in the natural world. But I really disagree with that. I know suffering is hard to quantify, but it seems to me that most of the suffering in the world is by humans or caused by humans. Like, there's no species that suffers like a human. We'll suffer in anticipation of something bad. We'll suffer when it happens. Then we'll suffer maybe the rest of our lives because it happened. No species suffers like a human. So in the non-human animal world, domesticated animals suffer their whole lives before they're slaughtered for food. And if we weren't here, all of that suffering, and it's huge, any vegan can tell you how the numbers on how many non-human animals are domesticated and have miserable lives just so that we can eat them. So if humans were gone and the domesticated animals that we use for food were gone, I think the suffering in the world would be less than half. Now, in the rest of the biosphere, a lot of what we perceive as suffering is really anthropomorphizing. And we focus on, the lion takes down the antelope and starts eating it before it's dead. Okay, that's horrible, but we don't like to see it. But that's how evolution has worked since it emerged billions of years ago. A couple 100,000 years ago, furless ape comes along and says, oh, I don't like that. It's more an example of the mentality of human domination to think that we know what's best for the natural ecosystems that we came along, evolved out of, and saw it. And now we go, oh, we don't like that. They are suffering. Well, that's my take on it.
Well, but we are the only thing that's capable of doing that. I mean, we can recognize that the process of evolution
doesn't have a real plan. It doesn't have an intelligence. It doesn't care how much we suffer. It doesn't care how much the animals suffer. It's not some intelligent design. And I think that we can recognize that, and we're the only thing capable of recognizing that. And I suppose what I would say is that I think there is a mistake in devaluing suffering that is different than ours, just because animals can't have the same anxieties that are typical of, and forms of suffering that are typical of human life. Their worst day on earth is still really, really bad. Their ability to perceive their suffering is still, I believe there's every evidence to suggest that it's just as catastrophic to them, even with their lower intelligence. And I just feel like it would be an incredible mistake to devalue that suffering just because it is not identical to ours. It's still suffering.
Yes, it's not identical in that it's not as much. They do eat each other and get eaten, but most of their lives is not involved in that kind of activity. I think my main objection is it's not our call. We think we're so smart, and yet look at what we've done. And is this the species that has the right to decide what happens to the rest of creation? I don't think we are. That's kind of a God complex that humans have. That's what I think. Now, I don't mean that you are wrong. I'm just saying I have a different perspective from you.
No, I understand. I don't take any of this lightly, and it's certainly, we're talking about things that if they go wrong, they could certainly create a lot more suffering than is really imaginable. But I do feel that we owe it to the animals to. I mean, let me propose it this way. Say we were to create a plan where in some way we were able to extinct the animals and then come up with a plan to extinct ourselves, and there's just this empty rock floating in space with nothing on it. What would really be the harm? There was nothing harmed in the process of eliminating that potential for suffering sentient wide. There certainly is a lot of, as we're living and contemplating such things, there's certainly a lot of sadness involved. There's no more art, there's no more animals, there's no more humans, there's not any of these things that we value in life. But there's also the amount of suffering is at a zero. Is that really a bad thing? Is that a tragedy? Do you feel that's a tragedy at that point? What would be the harm in getting to that point? Because it will happen anyway. And I think that's the biggest thing here, is that it isn't up to us. Ultimately, we all will go extinct. And perhaps human beings should be taking a little bit of responsibility of what that's going to look like and how much suffering there's going to be.
Yes, it will happen eventually, and we will die eventually, but that doesn't make it okay to kill us. But the responsibility part, humans are responsible for a lot of suffering on the planet. And if we take care of what we are absolutely responsible for, instead of looking at a system that some of us think is it shouldn't happen, I think that's all that we are entitled to do. It's not our call, basically. We haven't exactly displayed the greatest intelligence. I'm sure we are smarter than yeast in a vat of beer. We just haven't shown it yet. And for this species, us, to think that we know what's best for all of creation, I think shows a lot of hubris. And as far as what's the harm, I don't think you can quantify the harm involved in causing the extinction of the few 20 million species that, we're getting on that anyway. We are making it happen. But I think that we have no right to do that. That's basically my position on it.
So the only force that has a right to extinct us is nature itself, you believe?
The sun, yeah.
But then why do we have the right to extinct ourselves then?
Well, it's voluntary. we can think about it and realize that we are the only species that is causing all the other species to go extinct. And we can say, this is not right. We shouldn't do that. Let's stop doing that. We are more cognizant than a virus.
All right. Well, certainly we have a major disagreement there, and respectfully so. And thank you for sharing your thoughts on that.
Makes an interesting podcast.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Les, you've given us a tremendous amount of your time, and I really do appreciate it. I don't want to take up any more of your time. Certainly, we could talk about wildlife suffering and sentiocentric antinatalism and how VHEMT disagrees with this all day long, but I won't put you through that.
Well, I don't want to put our listeners through that either.
Well, yeah.
I think we covered it.
I think we covered it. I think we don't need to do any more of that. Do you have anything that you would like to plug?
Well, my main promotion these days is against natalist culture, which the patriarchy is working overtime to enforce, preventing people from not procreating when they don't want to procreate. Right now, natalism is enforced mainly by the patriarchy, especially here in the United States, and it is spreading all over the world, preventing people from having their reproductive freedom. The right to not procreate is severely restricted everywhere, and I think that's a really serious problem for human rights. That's it.
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. That's a very important point. So, well, Les, it's been an absolute pleasure having you with us today. Les, I really do admire you so much. Even though thank you. Even though we do have some rather large, fundamental different views and conclusions. Just one. It's just one. Yeah, it is really, it's a big one, but it really is just one.
Yeah.
Regardless of all that, I think all of antinatalism has a lot to learn from your bravery, your fearlessness, and your tenacity in all the years you have dedicated your life to this cause. Thank you, and I appreciate you. I really, really do. So thank you again for being with us.
Thank you, Amanda.
This podcast was made possible through the generous donations of other antinatalists during our The Prevention of Unnecessary Harm fundraiser. So on behalf of everyone working on the Exploring Antinatalism podcast, thank you for making this show happen. In our next episode, we will be speaking with the creator of Ephilism, Enmendum. So if you have any questions for Enmendum that you'd like asked on the show, please reach out to us on any of our social media sites or leave a comment below. Once again, this has been Old Fan. You can find me at Forever Wolf Films on YouTube, as well as keep up with my daily antinatalist news updates at Antinatal News on Twitter. Please follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Come chat with us on the Rogue Philosophy Antinatalism Discord, and email us at exploringantinatalism@gmail.com. This podcast can be listened to on our YouTube channel, Exploring Antinatalism Podcast, as well as Buzzsprout and iTunes. We also have a new website still under construction, www.exploringantinatalism.com. Podcast artwork donated by the incredible Life Sucks. All the best, and bye for now.